Доброе утро, уважаемые участники. Мы через
Good
минуту...
morning, distinguished participants. We'll probably be getting started in about a couple of minutes' time, while now we are still waiting for some people to get connected, to get online.
Санжар, саламатсызба.
Yeah.
Can you hear me?
Саламатсызба.
Oh, yeah.
Hello, can you hear me?
Hello, Mr. Kim. Yes, we can hear you. Great.
Great.
See you.
Мергүл естіліп тұр ғой,
Я естіліп тұр.
Жақсы.
Сізде сіздің презентацияңыз бар ғой, иә?
Yeah. Өткенде сіздерге қысқаша жіберген, соны көрсетіп айта берсем болады ғой,
Иә. Мен сізге бүгін тағы да жібергем, өйткені 3 қосымша слайд тағы да жіберген.
Жақсы, түсіндім.
Уважаемые коллеги, участники, кто только подключается, мы еще подождем пару...
Distinguished colleagues, friends, people are still getting connected, so we'll probably wait for a couple of more minutes and then we'll start our webinar.
Еще раз доброе утро. Я думаю, еще минуту подождем.
Hello again, good morning everyone. We'll probably give it one more minute because I can see people are still getting connected.
Ну, я думаю, мы можем начинать.
I think we can probably be getting started now. Assalamu alaikum. Hello. Good morning, everyone. Good morning, distinguished colleagues, partners, and also all of our distinguished participants of today's webinar. Welcome. And we're very pleased to see you today and happy to welcome you at the third finishing webinar within the framework of Central Asian Symposium on ICT in Education. My name is Mergul Alpizbaeva. I'm the specialist on education in the Cluster Bureau in Almaty. Today, this is the third webinar. It's going to be on the relevant topic, quality content of educational and open resources to develop skills in rural and remote areas, with the support of the Korean Fund and Korean Information Service on Education and Research, CARIS. Before I start, I would like to familiarize you with some of the logistical matters. So Let me share my screen right now.
Вы можете убрать баннер, чтобы я могла поделиться? Минуточку. Я надеюсь, мой экран виден.
I hope you can now see my screen.
Как вы знаете,
As you know, the symposium, CASIE, it's held through the series of webinars. The first one was on the topic of possibilities of long distance education with the use of ICT for teachers and students on September 25th, together with with the colleagues from UNESCO office in Bangkok. The webinar number 2, open and long distance education to assist lifelong learning. This workshop was held on October 7th, together with our Institute of Education Long Life Learning Institution of UNESCO. And now this is the finishing webinar number 3 in this series, designed to tackle quality contents of digital and open educational resources to develop skills. And basically, for some of the organizational matters, we would like you to, first of all, to make sure you are registered and your ID consists of your last name, first name, country, organization, so that as when we start interacting, we could know your name, the entity you represent, and also would like you to pay attention that these webinar is going to be recorded and we'll also be taking pictures of you. This webinar is held in 2 languages, in Russian and English. We're having simultaneous interpretation. In order to use the interpretation, you need to use the translation or interpretation function at the bottom of your screen on the Zoom platform, and you need to connect the right channel, either Russian or English. Also, the webinar's resources will be available at the websites of UNESCO offices in both Bangkok and Almaty. The colleagues will share the necessary links with you in the chat box so that you'd be able to get all of the materials you need. Also, I'd like to draw your attention to the point that the questions on the presentation or Q&A will be accepted via the chat box, which you will see here in the Zoom platform window. Please formulate your questions clearly and laconically. We'll only be using the window of the Q&A window to get your questions and to provide you with answers. And also, uh, after this workshop, all of the participants will be redirected to fill out a small evaluation form. Please fill out this evaluation form as soon as this workshop is over, because your evaluation is crucial for us. And at this point, I just would like to finish these logistical announcements, and let me move to the opening ceremony of this workshop. So let me pass the floor for the welcoming remark to the director of cluster office in Kazakhstan, Kyrgyzstan, Tajikistan, and Uzbekistan, Ms. Krista Pickett. Krista, the floor is yours. Thank you, Mayor Gul. Distinguished delegates, distinguished Mr. Kim, and distinguished colleagues from CARIS, distinguished speakers of today's webinar, distinguished participants, partners, and colleagues. On behalf of the UNESCO Cluster Office in Almaty, I'm very pleased to welcome you at the 3rd webinar, the Virtual Central Asian Symposium on ICT-Enabled Education in 2020. This particular webinar, as you know, is the last one in the series and designed to tackle the issues of quality content of digital and open educational sources to develop skills for rural and remote areas. Quality educational resources and also access to the useful, relevant, and interactive textbooks is a very complicated task for the rural and remote areas of Central Asia. This is even more serious problems in the time of pandemics or COVID-19. So within the series of workshops that we held basically as a response measures to COVID, um, the representatives of the Ministry of Education of Central Asia also noted the problem of allowing access to quality digital content alongside with the poor ICT skills and low competencies of teachers and students in difficulties in accessing internet. So basically, at today's webinars, some of our speakers will present various types of experience and initiatives, which are specifically designed to ensure access to quality educational contents and resources, and also for the distance learning in general. I would like to thank all of the speakers for your cooperation, for your assistance in having this particular webinar. I really hope that the experience that you share with us will be interesting and useful. So also I would like to thank our distinguished colleagues from CARIS for their regular support and productive cooperation in the area of promoting of ICT in education in Central Asia. Also would like to express my appreciation to my own team, Mirgul, Aisulu, Aijan, Danila and Aidana, I also mentioned, for their hard work in organizing this series of workshops. Would like to express my hope now that next year we will be able to have this symposium in traditional physical format as it had always been. So I'd like to wish you very productive work and very active participation. I'll see you next time. Please stay healthy. Thank you for your attention. Krista, thank you very much. I now would like to pass the floor to Mr. Min Kim, the Chief of Global Cooperation Section from CARIS. Distinguished Mr. Kim, the floor is yours now, please.
Thank you, Ms. Beigul, and greetings to Ms. Krista and speakers and panelists and ladies and gentlemen. My name is, as introduced, Min Kim, Chief of the Global Cooperation Section of the Higher Education and Academic Division of CARIS. On behalf of CARIS, I would like to begin today by thanking the UNESCO Bangkok and Almaty Office for Education for hosting this event, and to all of the viewers from around Asia and the world for tuning in to participate in this event, despite the serious global pandemic that lingers on. I would also like to extend a heartfelt message of solidarity to all of those who have been impacted internationally by this unprecedented global crisis. And I wish each of you, your family, colleagues, friends, and countrymen the best of luck and good health moving forward. As you may already know, CARIS stands for the Korea Education and Research Information Service, and is a quasi-governmental organization under the Korean Ministry of Education that specializes in ICT in education implementation across South Korea, as well as international official development assistance ICT in education project and initiatives with partner countries and organizations around the world. Given the scope and nature of the work that CARIS carries on, in addition to the close partnership that CARIS maintains with UNESCO and Central Asia partner nations, it is a pleasure to be speaking here today at the virtual Central Asia Symposium on ICT in Education 2020. Furthermore, it is a pleasure to be able to contribute to the topic of quality OER contents for skills development, which CARIS and Korea have been developing for a number of years, and which has come to fruition in the age of the COVID-19 pandemic. Since the beginning of the pandemic in Korea, which was the first nation with a major outbreak outside of China in the early part of the year, online education was seen as a means to continue education. This happened despite all issues our country was facing, and we were still able to provide the basic human rights of education for all, even under such extenuating circumstances. One of the biggest tools that South Korea had at her disposal to spread information amongst educators, parents, and students was open educational resources. Before the pandemic, CARIES already understood the importance of and was operating OERs early on through Korean Open Courseware, otherwise known as KOCW, and through the development and distribution of KOER services. This helped revitalize the university's distance classes prior to the pandemic and became a reliable means of learning for many as online classes became the norm in the early part of this year. Needless to say, the need, interest, and emphasis for OERs in online education are still at the center of many discussions on providing sustainable development for all via distance education. Finally, I hope that this symposium serves as a platform for providing us all with an opportunity to learn from each other, build new partnerships and networks, and set the best cases of forward-looking means and methods in which we have developed OERs and delivered open educational content to learners throughout the pandemic. It is also my wish that we can all move forward together through mutual collaboration that ensures inclusive and equitable quality education and lifelong learning opportunities for all. Once again, I would like to thank UNESCO for hosting this event, and to all of you who are digitally attending and participating. I wish you all and those around you the best of luck and good health, and look forward to the positive outcomes and new partnerships that we will develop from our collaboration here. Thank you. Thank you so much.
Mr. Kim, thank you very much. We would like to thank CARIES for their ongoing support of our activities, our reforms. Before we move to the main part, presentations, keynote speakers, would like to take a group picture with all of the speakers and panelists. So please use your cameras now to enable us to take this group picture. Thank you. I hope everyone is connected now. Okay, please now look on the screen. 1, 2, 3. Thank you very much. And now we would like to move to the main part of this webinar, specifically the agenda items, the presentations. Let me, for the first presentation, let me give the floor to our colleagues from CARIES, Hugh Choi and Mr. Kwan San Yoon, so that they will be able to present the presentation on the topic, the resourceful distance learning ecosystem for Korea's higher education in the light of COVID-19. Distinguished colleagues, the floor is yours now.
Hi, I'm Hugh Choi, a researcher of CARIES. Today, I'm going to briefly introduce some OER services that CARIES provides, and Mr. Hwan Sun shall deliver the implications and significance. Now, let's begin. Can you guys see the slide presentation materials?
Yes, we can see it well. So, please proceed.
So in higher education section, we have three main services, and the first one is called KOCW. This is a service for joint use of videos and materials that are voluntarily presented by universities and related organizations in Korea and abroad. Actually, in December 2009, it started to support academic learning in universities, and about 180 universities participated in 2017. About 1,200 courses were added each year and provide a total number of 20,000 courses. So KOCW consists of diverse content from home and abroad, such as the lectures of domestic universities, lectures of universities overseas, and also lectures by Nobel Prize winners. And also we have special lectures such as AP, NCS, and lecture series, and so on. These charts show the current status of KOCW. Annually, overall 17,000 lectures are added in domestic section and 15,500 lectures are added in overseas section. So let's move on to the second service. The second service is called KOER. This is the service for supporting distance learning in higher education. So we provide platform and contents to universities with trainings. So as it mentioned in the previous slide, it provides online content repository for university and college instructor. And also it's very easy to use. For example, you can just upload the content and click the share button. Then student can access to the lecture or content very easily. This is kind of closed platform for distance learning that can be accessed through the URL that automatically generated when contents are uploaded. And also it provides Moodle-based temporary learning management system service. So it opens to universities that do not operate an LMS, and also it's capable of hosting maximum 50,000 users. The last service is called ACOER. This is service that provides e-learning content on higher education to all learners in ASEAN countries. And this service is operated by ASEAN Cyber University Secretariat. It supports freely accessible, high-quality online teaching and learning materials. And also the aim of this service is to improve open online learning in higher education section for ASEAN member states. So, like KOER, it also supports Open edX LMS, which allows ACU member universities to operate their own online courses using this advanced system. It has now 767 contents, and the contents are mainly developed by ASEAN member universities in associate with cyber universities in Korea. So now Hwan-san gives a presentation on implications of using these OER services.
Okay, so good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, wherever you are. And so Hyoja has just given you a very quick and a small glimpse of how the OER ecosystem has been created and how they are being operated in the Korean and higher education sector. But because I believe we have some time to address questions and comments, so let me just briefly share with you on just about 2 implications we can take home from today, from our presentation. And again, I am fully aware that although the Korean case is definitely not a one-size-fits-all solution and which cannot be copied and pasted on other settings, but I think these are still very valid, which need to be considered regardless of wherever you are. So number 1, OERs and digital contents rely on basic foundations to ensure their continued access and usage. And I know this is a topic that we have been discussing every day, but I think it is never enough to emphasize and discuss the importance of building the basic infrastructure. And I'm emphasizing this because even in the Korean environment, we still face, there are still gaps in environments that still persist in the higher education sector in Korea. And it would be wonderful if we could input and strengthen all the universities and all the institutions infrastructure, but considering the limited resources, what the Korean case has done is that you can see on the slides that, for example, one of the latest, the 5-year support project for distance learning in higher education, it is being initiated with an aim to build a common regional hub for developing, creating, and sharing and utilizing OERs and contents across the regions and among different regions. So, for example, what is being done right now is that we are at the process of designating 10 universities who will be serving as a regional distance learning support center and who will be working as a regional hub and will be sharing a common studio. So for example, for the institutions that do not have the studio or the infrastructure within their schools, they have a common infrastructure they can share together. And I'm sharing with you this example because, from a policy implication point, I think we believe that this is just one of the different policy support instruments that can better facilitate the continued access, the continued usage and utilization of OERs and digital contents. And number two, different levels of curation or personalization can better assist the continued usage and dissemination of digital content and OERs. And when we talk about personalization, we usually think of the high level customization, for example, the learning analytics or AI-based services, but there are still a number of features that are still somewhat low level, but can still provide the necessary and adequate support for the continued usage of content. So for example, in one of the platforms that Hyo just shared with you in the KOCW platform, there's a curation service that provides the different OER content according to the Korean National Competency Standards, so a specific guideline regarding different skills, different specialization courses. And I'm sharing with you this example in an aim to imply that from a policy implication point, to support the different levels of these kinds of personalization, there would be a need for a specific and clearly defined competency framework or a set of content development guidelines that which could perhaps provide more practical assistance in the process of content development and usage. And I think I have used all our time right now, so I will be more than glad to share with you in our Q&A session. So thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you very much, dear Hyeje and Hwan-sun, for the resources that are available in Korea in the system of tertiary education. And I would like to remind all the participants that you can also ask your questions to the speakers in the special tool in Q&A box here on Zoom platform. And after the next presentation, we will have a short break for Q&A for these two presentations. And as to the next presentation, let me turn the floor to Dr. Ahmed Lili, who is a co-director of the laboratory of the OER Smart Learning Institute in Beijing Normal University of China. And he's going to make a presentation on the application of OER and OEP to ensure inclusive education, achievements and visions of Enrolled. Dr. Ahmed, the floor is yours.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much. Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, dear colleagues. So in today's presentation, I will talk about the use of OER and OEP to ensure inclusive education for those in rural areas. Of course, we will share the vision and achievements of Enrolled. Enrolled is UNESCO International Research and Training Center for Rural Education. So our first part, we will start by giving two definitions. The first definition is about OER, and the second definition that we will see in a bit is about OEP. So what is OER? OER stands for Open Educational Resources. So what do we mean by open educational resources? Open educational resources are resources which are freely published on the public domain, means we can access to them without any restriction for free. However, when we say free, it does not mean that we can use OER the way we want, or these resources the way we want. Actually, these resources are published under an open license. These licenses can define how we can use those resources. So like I said, open educational resources are resources which are published for free in the public domain under an open license. So open educational resources can ensure a lot of things, such as inclusive education, such as enhance knowledge sharing, such as facilitate access to education and lifelong learning. So this is for OER. The second one is OEP. OEP stands for Open Educational Practices. So what's the difference between OER and OEP? OER focuses on the content, means how we can create, how we can share, how we can produce an open educational resources. However, OEP, which is Open Educational Practices, focuses on the practices, means how we can use OER to enhance learning outcomes. So here we are talking about how, here we are talking about the practices. We are not talking about the content anymore. We are talking about how we can use those open educational resources in order to enhance learning outcomes and increase learning motivation and learning engagement. So these are the two main terms in our presentation today. And we will start by first research question or first question given by the organizers, which is how to ensure inclusive or accessible open educational resources. So to do this, actually, we have worked in Enrolled about this issue, which is a very important issue, and we have identified several skills or competencies that each producer or each teacher need to have. First skill is how to search and select OER. So one of the problems that we have noticed during this COVID-19 pandemic is too many teachers, they don't know how to search for OER or where to find OER. And this is a big problem. So one of the first skills that we tried to solve is to give information or to guide teachers about how to search and how to select. So for searching, we have two ways to find OER. The first way is to use generic search engines. So when we say generic search engines, means search engines which can be used to search for anything, like Google or like Baidu or like Bing or like Yahoo. So here we are talking about generic search engines. You can type in whatever you want to search for and then you hit enter. So this is the first method. The second method is you can go to dedicated search engines. So dedicated search engines, we mean that search engines which are dedicated for open educational resources. And in this context, we can mention CC Creative Commons, which is a dedicated search engine to search for open educational resources under the CC license. So this is the first thing. Also, when searching, we have different things or different rules that we can apply in order to enhance the searching method. We did not provide them here, but we will provide later on the link to these resources. For instance, the use of quotation. So in order to find the exact term or the exact sentence, we can use quotes. For instance, you can use plus or and in order to include or exclude specific terms. So here also we gave several guidelines or several recommendations on how to improve. First, how to search for open educational resources. Second, how to improve the searching method of open educational resources. The second one is, for instance, here we have given a lot of open educational resources repositories. So these repositories can be easily found by teachers. So in order to facilitate the job of teachers, we have given them a lot of very popular open educational resources. In these resources, you can see first we have subject domain. So in subject domain, we mean that what type of subjects are covered by these repositories. We can find multidisciplinary. Multidisciplinary means these resources cover different topics. Also, what is the educational level? By educational level, we mean like, for instance, higher education, vocational education, K-12 education, or all levels. Also, as we all know, in repositories, we have different services. So for instance, you can share and download, or you can collaborate, or you can recommend. So here we have given a generic dashboard for teachers about leading open educational repositories that someone can use in order to find a specific open educational resource. The second one, as we said, so first we talked about the searching. Second, we talk about the selection process. The selection process, like we said, open educational resources are published online, and therefore we can find thousands of resources online. So someone may ask how we can ensure that we are selecting the best or the most suitable open educational resources for us. So to answer this question, we have given several criteria that teachers can use in order to assess specific open educational resources, then decide if this resource is good or not. First criteria is, for instance, licensing. As we said, open license define how we can use a specific open educational resource. So we need to find open educational resources with open licenses, means licenses which give a lot of permission in order to update the content and reuse it in our context. Also, we are talking about interactivity. So here we can talk about interactive media, educational games, and stuff like that, instead of using simple PDF or Word documents. Also, we are talking about the accuracy, if the content is accurate or not. So this is for searching and selecting OER. The second one is about designing accessible OER. So how to design accessible OER? Here we have given several steps. The first step is to prepare the content. Second step is to ensure the accessibility of the content. Third is to add metadata. The metadata can help search engines to index these open educational resources, and then later on, if they can be easily found. Fourth is to attribute an open license, and fifth is to share it online. So like I said, these are the steps in order to design and produce an accessible open educational resource that can be easily found online. In this context, we also have given several steps on how to design an accessible open educational resource using Microsoft Word, which is very basic editing text. So here you can see when we click on this one, you can test the accessibility feature of your document. Also here we have given how to add metadata to your content. So like I said, here we have given several instructions. We cannot cover them all in this presentation, but we have given several screenshots about how to produce an accessible open educational resource using Microsoft Word. Also, to create open educational resources, there are also authoring tools, which are ready-made authoring tools that can be used easily by others in order to create open educational resources, and we have also shared them with teachers, and they can easily access to them. Here, third, which is about open license. As we said, open license is very important, and we need to learn about it. As you can see here, that reproducing others, we need to respect license. So teachers need to learn about how to use open license and learn about the different attribution of each license. Fourth is about using distance education. By saying distance education means we need to combine both online and offline, because in rural education, we know infrastructure is not very reliable, and too many people, they still don't have internet or like mobile devices. And here we are talking about problem of infrastructure. So therefore, we need not to rely only on internet, but we can use other mediums. For instance, the use of telecourses, means courses provided by TV, or also we can use radios. And here we can ensure that our learning is inclusive even for those who don't have internet. Of course, in this context, we have given several recommendations, even for policy makers and for different stakeholders, and you can find them later on in our book. Now, how to ensure the effectiveness or the mechanism of using open educational resources effectively. And here we will talk about open educational practices, or OEP, which we say that OEP are the practices of using OER in a very effective way. So in this context, we have conducted a literature review about the definition of OEP, and we have identified five dimensions that need to be presented. First one is open teaching, open assessment, open collaborations, of course, OER, and finally, technology, which can facilitate the communication or the interconnection between all these dimensions. So open teaching means that learners will be co-creators of the learning process along with their teachers. Open assessment means that teachers and students both can assess the learning process. And open collaborations means the use of social networks, for instance, to create open community. In this context, we can present a pilot experiment that we have conducted during the COVID-19 pandemic about teaching family education in our university, and we used OEP. So for open teaching here, as you can see, the teacher provided different problems about age groups for parents to learn about these problems and what type of solution parents should follow. Then we asked the students to identify more problems for each age range. And students need to search online and find more problems and solutions. Meanwhile, the teacher will be more as a facilitator rather than a teacher. Means the teacher will facilitate the learners by suggesting new references, by guiding them about what type of keywords they can use, etc. And then all learning materials collected from the students were put in supplemental material, as you can see here, and it was uploaded online under CC license that can other teachers use in their context. For open collaboration here, we have created an open community using TTIO social network. TTIO is almost like Facebook, and it can be used for learning. Here we can see that the teacher posted a question to students, and then you can see that students are posting their answers using comments. And then the teacher encouraged the students in order to collaborate together, means the students can assess each other, which we are talking about peer assessment, and give feedback about each other's like responses. And here we can enhance self-reflection or support self-reflection, etc. So this is one of the examples to use OEP. So in this context, we have produced a book in collaboration with UNESCO IIT in Russia. And this book covers different use of OER and OEP in line with UNESCO recommendations. As we know, UNESCO has released by the end of 2019 recommendation about OER adoption, which cover 5 objectives. So in line with this, we have produced a book, and you can find all the details that I just presented in this book. I can later on share the book with organizers, and they can send the link to all of you guys, or you can also find it on the IIT website. The second book that we have developed is about how to use...
Доктор Ахмед, я прошу прощения. Завершайте.
Okay, Dr. Ahmed, I'm sorry, you've got to be finishing right now because your time limit is up. Sorry.
Thank you. Yeah, so the last book is about the use of open educational resources and practices for people with disability. Thank you so much. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Dr. Ahmed, for this highly substantial presentation, detailed presentation, and thank you very much for giving us so much details about those steps on how to create and use open educational resources. And basically, you provided some examples, some case studies. Now let us move to a small Q&A session. Basically on the 2 previously made presentations. Because of the time limit, unfortunately, we'll only be able to take probably 2 questions to each speaker. And the other questions, we will ask the speakers to respond to these questions through the chat facility or in the Q&A window later. So question one, the first two questions will be to the speakers from CARIES. Distinguished Hoji Hanso, we've got this very interesting question for you. This is about quality of content that is provided within the open educational resources that you introduced. Well, this question came from Farhad Jumabai. So what he's asking is, in your country, how and who can guarantee, who assures the quality of content of various educational programs, specifically when people get degrees or when people do not get degrees in the system of higher education? Who assesses the quality of online education? How do you ensure quality through online education and the system of higher education? Thank you.
Let me give you an answer. When its universities develop the content and upload the contents to the OER platforms, such as KOER, CARIES goes through some level of content review to ensure quality control is being held. The same is being done for OER content for primary and secondary learning, as a specific team with CARIES reviews contents newly developed. And basically, the contents of KOCW are not credit-based one. It just can be used for learning materials to help the regular courses. However, in terms of the ACOER and KOER, we do have functions for e-assessment with the help of teaching assistants and professors.
And let me just add one more point with regards to the quality control. I just wanted to point out the fact that universities, so the higher education institutions in Korea, so they have a more levels, a little bit of autonomy. So they're more autonomous in terms of creating contents, whereas the contents for primary and secondary distance education, they, I believe almost all the contents go through the CARIES content review. So, but when the university, so it's a little bit, the universities, I would have to say they're a little bit freer, as they, each universities, they are it's up to them to exploit the resources they have, and the CARIES would be somewhat of a, they would go through a secondary review. So there's a somewhat slight difference in the quality control being held for primary and higher education contents. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And this is the second question from Hu Hua Fan. The question sounds like this. How do we use open educational resources in Korea? Are they part of the university education, or these open educational resources they are for self-education too? So do you have any stats on how these open resources are actually being used? Any statistics about that? And also, basically, if there is any statistics, there are also some other questions. Please, if you manage, try to respond to this one in the chat box. But right now, please answer these questions if you can.
이거 제가 먼저 답변해요.
이거 해야 된다고 하는데.
방금 뭐
나오는데.
Okay, so with regards to how the KOER is being used, Hyoja mentioned earlier that it's being provided right now as a additional support project for universities that do not have the adequate infrastructure to meet the sudden demand towards distance education, because I'm sure that Korea, also just like other countries around the world, last April, since the outbreak of the COVID-19, we had a very dramatic increase on the demand for distance learning. So the actual usage of distance education, the OERs and digital contents was, if it was more up to the universities before the outbreak, I would have to say right now, it is being primarily used among the institutions that have more or less that were somewhat that have not been using distance education before the outbreak of the COVID-19. And I'm saying this because the project itself is the primary purpose of the KOER project is to provide this suddenly dramatic demand in order to bridge the gap between different regions, because as I briefly mentioned earlier, there actually, in reality, there is a level of capacity gap between the regions and the universities, and these, if these gaps are not being addressed, there are concerns that these gaps among universities will also lead to gaps in regions, because these universities are all around the country. So again, ultimately, I would have to say the main purpose of the KOER project is to ensure that a win-win growth, a equal level of growth is being pursued across the entire country, entire society. I think I would have to stop there for now.
Thank you very much, Jai and Hwansoon, for your answers. Thank you very much. If you manage to take some other questions in a chat box, please try to use the chat box window to respond to those too. And the next question, I think we'll take one question, because we've got two more questions to Dr. Ahmed. But because of the lack of time limitations, we'll only be able to address one question to Dr. Ahmed. And the second question, Dr. Ahmed, please use the Q&A box to respond to that one. So the question to you, Dr. Ahmed, is from Farhad Jumabayev too. What he is asking is how or in what way the educational resources are being adopted for various inclusive groups or inclusive communities. Thank you.
Thank you so much for this question. Actually, for inclusiveness, it can be in different ways, like inclusiveness with people with disabilities, inclusiveness for people in rural areas, but we will focus on the main topic, which is rural education. So for rural education, as I said, the key word is openness. So unlike commercial resources, or open educational resources can be easily used, of course, based on the open license. Means, let's give a simple example, which is textbooks. So for textbook, if they are not open license, we cannot reuse them in our context. First, we need to buy them. And in order to buy them, you need to have money. So in this way, if I don't have money, I cannot use textbooks. And I cannot reuse them in my context, because I need to ask for permission from others, because it is like up to the publishers and the way they publish them. And then I need to pay money in order to use these textbooks. However, if I use open textbooks, which is now being adopted by several universities, even in United States, even in Asia, in China, in several places, so I can easily use this textbook in my context without any problems. Of course, with respect in the open license. I will give you another case study, a simple case study from our context. So in the Arab region, we have only 3% of the content which is in Arabic. Imagine, only 3% from the whole content which is in Arabic. So the thing is, or the solution that we did is we published a lot of open textbook in Chinese. Then these textbooks are open license. Then since these textbooks are open license, we can easily translate them to Arabic. And then all people can start learning these textbooks, high quality textbook in Arabic. So you see, with open license, we can easily translate these books and reuse them in our context. We don't need to pay for anything. We don't need to do anything. However, if these textbooks are not an open license, first I need to ask the publisher. Of course, the publisher will ask for money and I need to pay money. And here, if I don't have money, I cannot pay. So here we can see a simple example of the use of open textbooks, especially from the enrolled perspective, and how we can foster inclusiveness even for those who don't have money. And especially in rural education, one of the biggest problems is lack of quality resources, learning resources. This is one of the problems. So this can be easily achieved by enhancing or reusing quality open educational resources in their context to translate them to any language they want, Chinese, Russian, or any language easily without any problems. And thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Dr. Ahmed, for your detailed answer to this question. I think there was one particular question. Please try to tackle this later in the chat box. This is about licenses. Please, we would appreciate if you did it. Now we would like to start the second round of presentations. And now I would like to pass the floor to Mr. Sanjar Kenjahanuli, Executive Director from Billy Media Group, Kazakhstan. Sanjar will introduce the digital solutions they offer for rural schools in remote areas in Kazakhstan. Sanjar, the floor is yours now. Thank you, Mirgul. Can you hear me? Can you? Yes, we can hear you. Thank you. Hello, distinguished ladies and gentlemen. Greeting. Let me share my screen now.
지금 당장이야. 20분 정도 있다가 택시 불러줘.
презентацию видно, да?
Well, you can see my presentation now, right? Can you see my presentation? Can I start? Yes, we can see it. Please start. Okay, so I just would like to thank you for the organization of this workshop and start with the point that the team of people who has one single mission. We've been working on this mission since 2010, and we spent all of our time on this particular mission. Well, briefly speaking about who are Billy Media Group, we've been working since 2010. We've been working in the area of digital education. We started with some social projects. The Wikipedia translations into Kazakh language, aiding Kazakh to Google Translate, and also developed our own educational products. From the standpoint of quality of education and accessibility, which could be extremely useful and would really help, well, first of all, in Kazakhstan and rural schools, in urban schools, to be able to transform and direct education in the right direction. Since 2011, we registered our entity. Right now, we have 250 different specialists, experts who are enthusiasts in creating quality educational content. And over the past 10 years, we've been working with all of the schools in Kazakhstan. Well, we have 5 key educational products, which have more than 100,000 educational resources in Kazakh and Russian and English. And plus, when pandemic started, well, it was just in the last spring. If you remember, the schools in Kazakhstan, they got closed at the end of the third term. And what started was a very quick migration of the entire educational system to the distance learning mode. The Ministry of Education initiated various solutions for distance learning amongst the companies like ours. Well, basically, they started looking for the entities who could provide their educational resources, their development for public access, for general access. And at that point of time, we opened our resources, our online school, well, which teachers across Kazakhstan used. And for the fourth term in school, we developed 2,000 school lessons for on every topic that were broadcasted via two national television channels, Balapan and Yalarna. At the end of the fourth term, while making references to all kinds of research globally, we started the preparations for the new school year, specifically for the new school year starting in fall, where we invited Nazarbayev intellectual schools in order to be able to quickly get together within the shortest time frame possible. Within 3 months, we needed to get together all of the necessary educational materials, resource materials on 42 different subjects in Kazakh and in Russian. So basically, we use 521 teachers from Nazarbayev intellectual schools, plus 250 staff of our own. Right now, we're working for a single objective to ensure quality education through pandemics via our online platform called Online Mektep or Online School. Well, we couldn't really do it completely free of charge because everyone understands that the content, specifically video, materials, interactive contents, it's all comes expensive. So we had to sign contracts with every school that would want to use and apply our resources. Well, today, for online Mektep, 3,600 schools are subscribed now. Well, the prices are quite affordable. It's like 111 tenge, like 25 cents per student, school students. Well, and we some of these schools, they've been working with us for almost 5 years. They are connected to our resources. This is about 6,100 schools totally across the country. 7,096 schools across the country work with us, and so, and including over 2,000 small-sized schools where lots of teachers' positions are vacant. They have very few students. They are lacking some textbooks, lacking contents. So for these various schools, we are providing our resources. So very briefly, let me show you some of the stats. In Kazakhstan right now, there is a very high demand for electronic educational resources. So there are three types of stats. 0KZ, this is the Kazakh International Statistics. You can see our educational resource, which is right now in high demand.
And every day we have more than 1 million users, and there are more than 30 million viewers. Indeed, in Kazakhstan, distant learning is in very high demand. And of course, for the teachers, it was very difficult to get adapted. But now we have already passed this step, and we are providing a lot of trainings, a lot of support. And here, of course, we have to work jointly with the users, because the users need to understand that this distant learning during pandemic is our common headache for the whole world. And in the majority of cases, we receive a lot of positive feedback, but we do not deny that there are some problems. If you take a look at Yandex, everything depends on the period. Sometimes we have more than 10 million users from various devices. In the majority of cases, 70% of cases, the students and the teachers get access to the digital content via mobile devices, because still people are short of PCs. Now in Kazakhstan, there will be procured more than 500,000 units of PCs and equipment intended for teachers and students. If you take a look at Google Analytics, now in Kazakhstan, distant learning is prevailing. And in spite of certain difficulties in, for example, ICT competences or shortage of equipment and problems with internet connection, especially in rural areas, the demand for distant learning is huge. And of course, digitalization of the educational sector is only growing. What has already been done? We have already designed 5,700 lessons with more than 100,000 exercises on 42 subjects, so that the children, students will be able to work in an asynchronous mode. And in simultaneous mode, it is also possible to use Google Meet, Microsoft Teams, and Zoom. And we have already integrated Zoom into our online Mektep platform. And additionally, we provided open source solution, Jitsi, with the help of which the teachers can communicate directly with their students. But at the same time, stats are showing that more than 70% of the classes, lessons are conducted in asynchronous mode. When the students, when they have a PC, when they have a good internet connection, irrespective of the time, the students may have access to the online resources and have their classes like this. And of course, I would also like to tell you who we are working for the primary school, for the Kazakh language, Russian literature, physics, chemistry, biology, ICT, algebra, geometry, mathematics, English, and of course we've been working with the teachers on music, on physical culture. We created for them some very nice and useful resources which are in high demand. And additionally, we introduced some new subjects that probably were added up during the last 2 years, such as, for example, design and graphics and basics of entrepreneurship. So here you see the catalog of all the subjects that are available on our website. And our designers provided a very user-friendly and easy, intuitive interface so that these resources can be used very easily. When we talk about the methodology, we've been thinking about it for quite a long time, but our experience is as long as 10 years. And of course, creativity of the teachers doesn't have any boundaries. This is the reason for which we have the so-called blended learning. We have adaptive learning, where the content is usually adapted to the level of the school or the level of the teachers, because there are some schools where there is insufficient number of teachers. And on the one hand, it is rather challenging to adapt the content to different needs. But, you know, since there are different levels of learning, there are 9 levels of learning. The 3 of them, ABC, are the main ones. And then every level is subdivided into 3 sub-levels. And therefore, every child, every student can find all the necessary exercises which are meeting his level. And the so-called topsy-turvy class, it's when the children, the students are trying to do the class before the online class with the teacher, and then they are trying to explain what they have understood to their teachers during the online class. And personalized learning it's pretty popular, especially in the rural areas when the number of teachers is insufficient at schools. And of course, it is intended to fill up the gap. And we see that both online formats. In online format, it is pretty widely used. And I would like also to tell you a few words about our educational devices that are in great demand, especially this year. And when especially we are using personalized learning. And when we were talking about the functions of online Mektep, of course, we've been thinking first and foremost about the interactivity and the feedback and the role of reporting of the student in the learning process. This is the reason for which we have such functions as, for example, real-time exercise fulfillment. There are chats. There is a collective chat, group chat, and there is an individual chat when, for example, a student is lagging behind or has some very specific questions on various exercises or topics. Then the student can individually discuss this issue, this problem with the teacher, or the parents can also communicate and interact with the teacher directly. They don't do it in WhatsApp or Telegram, they do it on the same platform. So online homework, checkup, and assessment evaluation. So there are some topics that probably we did not manage to cover. And this is the reason for which we are providing a specific tool with the help of which the teachers can also create their own content for evaluation of the knowledge. We also anticipated and designed a tool for evaluation of the students' knowledge for a particular subject, and we do it on a quarterly basis as well. The statistical data are provided both for the decision makers in the Ministry of Education, for the heads of educational departments in the regions and in the districts, so that they will be able to see how many tasks the teacher is sending out, distributing among the students, and how many hours the teacher is working. And of course, we have mobile applications for iOS and Android. We had a lot of DDoS attacks in Kazakhstan because, here the competition is really very tough in this area, and we received huge support from the Ministry on Digitalization and the Committee on National Security, who provided their own firewalls to minimize DDoS attacks, because the majority of DDoS attacks were from abroad on our platform. At least this is what we believe. They tried to hack our system, and our IT team jointly and with the support of the National Security Committee enabled us to withstand it. Sanjar, please, could you accelerate your presentation because you have already exhausted your time? Okay, I'm going to send this presentation to you. You will be able to go through it and understand what are the main purposes and tasks. With regard to the inclusive education, we are anticipating a maximum number of subtitles, and so that the students will be able to use their gadgets or PCs and will be able to go through all the resources necessary for them. And in the we have these resources which are anticipated by the standard of the national educational requirements. And now I would like to show you the a resource that is called academia.kz, which is intended for the upgrade of the competences of a teacher. And at the same time, it provides all the guidelines on how to use various digital resources during pandemic. A huge volume of work was carried out by academia.kz team to support the teachers. And KTAB.kz is representing more than 5,000 books which are available for reading and listening, and they're supporting also the Kazakh language. And we are providing an indefinite catalog of books. They are provided on a free of charge basis for everybody who would like to read virtual books, ebooks, or who would like to listen to them. And we also have OpenU, which is an open university of Kazakhstan. With the support of our government, we created this open university. These are the so-called MOOCs, and they were translated for the universities of Kazakhstan, and there are such resources which are available both in Russian and in Kazakh. So if you have any questions, if we are able to share our experience with you, we will be very happy for this. Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Sanjar, and I believe that if there will be any questions, additional questions, then the participants will be able to ask these questions in Q&A box on this platform. And for the final presentation, I would like now to turn the floor to Mr. Florian Marcus, who is the advisor, digital transformation advisor on e-Estonia, and he's going to talk about e-education in Estonia. Florian, please, the floor is yours.
Good morning from Tallinn. Thank you very much for the invitation. I have two promises for you. Number one, I will use maximum 10 minutes of your time. Number two, I will tell you about digitalization in the education sector in Estonia. I will share my screen for this, of course. I will do so from here. So, and I will get the timer here as well. Good. So yes, I'm a digital transformation advisor, meaning that I show governments around the world how digitalization works in Estonia and how we can make it happen in their country. Today, we're supposed to talk about e-education, especially open educational resources, but there are some mixed news here. The truth is that Estonia does not primarily focus on completely open educational resources. Rather, they have a sort of mixed approach. And I will tell you what that means. In general, I think Estonia started earlier than most other sort of post-Soviet nations with digital transformation in the education sector. In 1994, the government passed the first digitalization strategy. And in 2015, the target was already made to digitalize all educational materials, regardless of what subject. And so on. Every single school in the country is legally obliged to have a so-called e-school system that is not necessarily about digital learning materials, but rather about the school's infrastructure. So the notion that, as you can also see on the slide, that teachers can manage their classes, that kids can upload their homework, that tests can happen online, and so on. This program has actually helped save a lot of time for the teachers, around 45 minutes for each teacher every day, which is quite a lot. And also, in traditional systems, you are able to cut, I don't know, let's say you're a kid, you don't want to go to school today, you can fake your parent's signature because you've probably seen it somewhere. I personally, I don't think I've ever done that, but I think it's a problem that's familiar to many teachers around the world, not just in Estonia. Actually, Estonia was able to cut down on sort of skipping classes from students by around 30%. Because what we have in Estonia is an electronic identity for all parents, for all students, for all kids. And the parents can give a legally binding digital signature with which they confirm that their kid is actually ill. So the kid cannot fake their parent's signature because it's a digital process and only the parent knows their own signature, digitally speaking. There are some good news though as well. So in Estonia, yes, you do have to pay for most of the licenses, but only if you use them on a bigger scale. In general, many companies run what we call the sort of Spotify scheme. So you only pay per license that you use. In Estonia, the government, the educational ministry is paying for those companies, for those licenses, so that the schools can figure out throughout the different school years which educational materials are the most useful to their students and which ones they want to continue using for the future as well. So this way we can automatically filter out what is the best content and what is the least helpful content for the different students in different classes in different subjects. With the context of COVID-19, of course, there was also a challenge for us because we still do have physical schools, and but thankfully we had this guideline that we want to digitalize all materials, all learning materials, and so on. And the deadline for that set by the ministry was actually 2020. So the timing for us was perfect. And in March, I think it was the 12th of March, it was a Thursday, the government declared that next Monday, we will close all schools around the country. And all the schools were like, okay, then we'll continue teaching online, and all the materials were already there. There was a small shortage, just as was mentioned in previous presentations as well. There was a small shortage among big families with several children for computer devices, because yes, basically every family in Estonia has a computer and a phone and so on. But if you have 3 kids, you don't have 3 free rooms, you don't have 3 laptops lying around. But for that, the government had a national program where people were invited to donate their secondary or spare computers and laptops to school children that would need them the most. Within that context, there was also something else. Estonian companies, those that I mentioned before, for the school system, for the digital education materials and so on, they decided to sort of temporarily open up their systems to the rest of the world. And I want to show you where all of that material is. It's a page called educationnation.99.math. I can share the link later as well, where not just Estonian companies, but also companies from our northern neighbors, Scandinavian friends from Finland, Sweden, and so on, have shared all of their different education materials, whether it is about coding and mathematics, whether it's about learning languages and so on. And you can always see under every single offer for what sort of time period or for what sort of class size you can use the systems for free. Free access for all, free use to new schools, and you can test it for 60 days to see whether it works for you. So there are lots of different programs that might help you run your education online, regardless of where you're based. A tiny word about the future as well. This is more about physical schools, but still, there is one point on the slide that I really want to talk about, and it's the first one. So the proactive government services that we're rolling out in Estonia right now are also relevant for the education sector. The logic here is that we want to offer services to the population proactively when we know that they are entitled to it. For example, when a child is born, and the government knows the address of the parents, then we could already start in the citizens portal a notification that says, congratulations on the birth of your child. Here are the 3 closest primary schools to your location. You can choose one of those, and we will reserve a place for your child at that school 6 years into the future. So then every single school in the country will also get a notification, hey, attention, in 6 years, you will have around 200 more students than you have right now. We know how many classrooms your school has. We know how many teachers your school employs. So now we can already say, based on those calculations, you will probably need 10 new classrooms and 30 new teachers. So we can already start with the building procedures, the funding, training of the teachers today, so that they are ready in 6 years when they are needed. And so this is another way in which digitalization can really help improve educational quality without even talking about digital education materials. Although, as I said, of course, we also pay a lot of attention to that. And that's one of the reasons why we are looking quite good in global education rankings. We're the first Western nation among all the different educational guidelines, whether it's reading or maths and so on. I would actually leave the rest of the time for questions, and also so you can digest what all of this means for your home country, for your school, for your district. In general, I'm looking forward to your questions. If you have any further questions, you can always add me on LinkedIn, and you can also send me an email to florian.marcus@eas.ee. That would be it from my side, and I hope you all stay safe and keep teaching the future generation of children and specialists around the world. Thank you very much.
Спасибо большое, Флориан, за вашу презентацию.
Florian, thank you very much for your presentation. Special thanks to you for actually getting connected to us despite this early hour in Estonia. Now let us move to the Q&A session, specifically related to the two previous presentations. I will first address some questions to you, Sanjar. I can see that you've already responded to some of these questions in the chat box, but it would be nice if you could respond to this aloud so that we get this translated into English. So the question sounds like this. Can we use this platform autonomously? Because in the rural areas, internet or communications are unstable. What is access that is available to this platform for rural schools? Thank you for this question. Well, actually, I responded to colleagues. We have two approaches to use here. Schools have their own devices, their own PCs, laptops. We enable them to download the information for the respective classes and the respective languages, like grade 5 in Kazakh. So basically, kids can download everything they need for one particular term and have it. In this, about 18,000 educational devices were purchased by schools, colleges, kindergartens. So basically, we have our own educational computers, PCs, interactive screens. So basically, in partnership with Microsoft, and specifically, we have a manufacturing facility that produces that based on our patent. So we offer these two solutions: either use our devices, or the schools can use their own devices and download. So the schools choose whatever they like most, whatever is most suitable for them. So this is my answer. Thank you. Thank you, Sanjar. And the second question is, it's a very good question, although it's a very long one. I'll try to shorten it somehow. Farhad Jumabayev is asking whether he talks about the OECD study, Bromyak, that about 15% of adults in Kazakhstan mentioned the lack of any experience in the use of computers, no computer skills at all. And according to BIAC survey, adults couldn't really deliver any task in the high-tech environment because of these skills lacking. So the question is to you. Well, I just would like to hear your proposal. Should the government of this country adopt some kind of a policy for the lifelong learning? What kind of proposals would you make, having the vast wealth of experience in e-learning already? Well, I think this is a very global question, which doesn't have any short answer. Of course, I can send you my link. Well, we've been having this governmental educational program. We've been having this for 5 years, the current educational development program. It also includes the component of lifelong learning. From our side, from the side of our team, well, of course, what is dominant here is the development of the large number of digital content. large volume of digital content. For the small country like Kazakhstan, it's really important to keep up with the other advanced economies because I think there are two huge zones where, two huge areas where the war is on. One is a trade war, the other is the information war, the contents war. Every country, if it wants to stay as a nation, if it wants to continue developing, if they want to invest into human capital or develop its economy, I think they should invest a lot of money into the development of easily accessible quality content in education, both in their native tongue and in international tongue, specifically in English. So these kinds of things, global things like PISA tests, a colleague, Florian from Estonia, just told us about this. I think this is a very good emphasis for any country to focus specifically on these measurable tests like PISA tests. And we already made our resources for PISA preparation available to people. So hopefully the stats will get better eventually, because for PISA, while Kazakhstan, out of almost 70 countries, we are like in the last 10th, at the bottom. Well, could it be my problems, but Sanjar, we lost you, unfortunately. Well, we might even say that. I'm sorry, was there a question or? Oh, we couldn't hear you for quite some time. Bad internet connection, yeah. Well, the third point I'd like to make, there is a huge dominance of social media, social networks, and kids, they get some educational content and upbringing content via YouTube. So basically, we need to develop content in YouTube is crucial. It's very important. We have two YouTube channels. They are in high demand right now. In the Kazakh segment, we have more than 200,000 subscribers for the Kazakh content. We invest in it, both money and time, and we produce stuff in Russian too. Just to make sure that in the smaller countries, well, in order to facilitate the development of human capital in the country's economies, I think it's really important to invest into quality digital content to be as easily accessible as possible. Thank you. Thank you, Sanjar. And there are also a couple of more questions, but because of the time limitations, well, we can't really take them all. So if you have a possibility, please, if you would appreciate if you responded to this in a chat box. And there is one question to Florian, so I'll probably ask this in English.
The question is from Jay Nayar. What would the strategy be for activity-based learning and inclusive education during the online learning sessions?
Good question. So it's two parts. The first one is sort of physical education and everything that is not necessarily text or video or interaction based. These things are being done in two ways. Number one, many of the tasks you can do at home. So if you have a free room where you can do some physical exercise or something like that, that's certainly good. But the truth is also that because the COVID numbers are really low in Estonia, we have, I think the last 7 days, we've had like 16 per 100,000 infections. So the truth is that also sports classes can happen together in free air with enough distance and so on. So this has partially continued. About inclusive education, this is the biggest challenge. And the truth is that Estonia was not prepared for that, because the question is, how can you make digital content accessible to people that cannot hear, that cannot see, and have other challenges that hold them back. So for these special schools in inclusive education, it has still been mostly physical, also because especially in those inclusive education institutions, the parents rely on the children being taken care of during the day when they have to work, more than with healthy children. So this is one challenge that I think digitalization can't quite solve.
Thank you very much, Florian. And the next and final question to you from Saadat Bazarova. It may be too early, but what does society, parents think about online school in Estonia?
It's not too early. We've had it for a decade now. So, so in general, the parents are big fans because they can see the progress of their children. Some kids are bad at communicating. They don't want to share with their parents every single time how bad their maths test went or something like that. And the truth is that kids have very little incentive to always tell the truth. I'm sure that when we were kids, we didn't always tell the truth or always share everything. So the digital system actually gives a lot more transparency to the whole process. And it also helps both teachers and parents realize earlier if there is a problem, exactly what Sanjar mentioned, that you have early monitoring systems. Your kid is not doing well in English. Should we have a talk about this together? So there are a lot of options that we can use to make sure that the kid will continue in education and do better in the future, because that's what we want for the society as a whole.
Thank you very much, Florian.
Well, I think we are just nearing the completion of this webinar because we've almost exhausted our agenda, and we're saying the word of big thanks to all of our speakers. Thank you very much for sharing your experience. Thank you very much for the practices and initiatives that are available in different countries and the ones that I used to ensure the open resources and distance learning, and also in order to provide quality content, digital content, including for the purposes of inclusive education and for those participants and teachers who are located remotely. So we kind of hope that for the delegates who attend this webinar, representatives of ministries of education of Central Asia and some other countries, while all of the representatives and stakeholders, for everyone who works in the area of education, those who participate in our webinars, well, we would like to thank you for your interest and kind of hope that today's webinar and all the previous webinars have been useful and interesting and relevant for you. We try to, well, maybe sometimes to the very minimal extent, we try to cover different issues that exist in the area of developing skills for remote and rural areas in Central Asia and outside of Central Asia. So we kind of hope that we will be able to see each other again. If you have any specific questions or proposals, please tell us about those in the questionnaires to which you are going to be redirected automatically after the completion of this webinar. We also would like to thank and express our sincere appreciation to colleagues from CARIS, the Korean Information Service on Education and Research, for their constant support with their platform for this Central Asian Symposium for ICT in Education. Our colleagues have been supporting us in the very important issue, and this issue is, of course, is becoming even more relevant in the light of current pandemics, or how to ensure quality education with the use of information and communication technologies. So we kind of hope we'll continue these kinds of support measures for the officials from the ministries, professors, teachers. So I'd like to thank you for your cooperation. I'd like to thank all of our colleagues who've been involved in the preparation for this workshop, this webinar. I'd like to wish you all very good health, stay healthy, and have a good day. This ends this webinar. Thank you very much. Kop Rahmet and Kazak, Rahmat, Tashakur. Thank you very much and goodbye.